The storm outside the hospital windows raged like a wounded animal, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside Jonathan Hale's heart. He stood in the dim hallway, frozen, watching through the glass as doctors rushed around his daughter, his only child, his little girl who had once filled every corner of his mansion with laughter. Now, she lay motionless, eyes empty, fragile as a fading breath. At just 10 years old, Emma Hale had lost not only her hearing after a tragic accident, a broken bar, but also her will to live. She no longer looked at anyone, no longer smiled, no longer reached for her father's comforting hands. The world had become silent to hear a broken bar, and she had retreated into a deeper silence of her own. Jonathan, a billionaire known across the country for building empires, suddenly felt powerless, terrified, and painfully small. Money couldn't fix this, influence couldn't fix this, and neither could the best specialists he had flown in from every corner of the world. Every time he tried to sign something to her, she turned away. Every time he brought gifts to brighten her hospital room, she didn't even blink. He was losing her, and he didn't know how to stop it. If you believe in kindness, healing, and second chance as a broken bar, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue telling stories that touch hearts. Jonathan blamed himself. He should have been there during that school field trip. He should have held her hand when she crossed the street. He should have protected her. Losing his wife years ago had already shattered him, and now the fear of losing Emma emotionally, spiritually, or physically felt like being suffocated from the inside. She was slipping away, and he was helpless. Her world had gone silent, but his world had gone dark. Weeks turned into months. Therapies failed, psychologists failed, even music therapy failed. Though Emma used to dance like sunshine itself, she refused to engage with anyone. She refused to learn sign language. She refused to even look at Jonathan. She sat in her wheelchair by the hospital window, staring at nothing, still as a shadow. Her tiny fingers, once busy with crayons and dolls, now only taped nervously on the armrest, an anxious rhythm, the only sign that she was still here. Doctors began to quietly warn Jonathan that emotional shutdown in children could become permanent. They told him that without progress, she might never reintegrate, never find joy again. Jonathan stopped sleeping. He stopped eating. The staff whispered that the once commanding CEO was now just a grieving father drowning in guilt, and in a broken bar life, in its strange, unpredictable mercy, sent someone. Nathan Brooks had never met Jonathan Hale, but their worlds collided on a rainy Tuesday morning in the Pediatric Rehabilitation Center. Nathan wasn't rich. He wasn't famous. He was a single father with 2 jobs, worn sneakers, and a tired smile that somehow still carried warmth. He was there to bring his 8-year-old son, Noah, to his physical therapy appointment. Noah, who had survived a house fire. Noah, who walked with a slight limp and a shy courage that could make anyone's heart soften. Nathan noticed Emma first. He noticed the sadness around her the way someone who had known their own grief might notice a familiar shadow. Noah saw her too and tugged on his father's sleeve, whispering that the girl looked lonely. But it wasn't Emma's expression or lack of idea that drew Nathan in. It was Jonathan, a father who looked like he hadn't breathed in months, a father whose desperation hung on him like soaked clothing. Nathan didn't know Jonathan Hale was a billionaire. He didn't know the mansion, the private jets, or the companies. All he saw was a man about to break. The first day they crossed paths, they didn't speak. The second day, Nathan simply nodded in sympathy. The third day, Noah approached Emma's wheelchair with a hesitant smile, holding the small clay elephant he had made in therapy. Emma didn't react. She didn't look at him. She didn't blink. Noah quietly left the clay elephant in her lap before limping away. Nathan thought that was the end of Ida until the next day when he walked into the waiting room and saw Jonathan holding the tiny clay elephant in his hands like it was treasure. There was something different in Jonathan's eyes. Hope? Number. It was too fragile to be called hope. More like a broken bar. Question. Your son made this? Jonathan asked quietly. Nathan nodded. Yeah, he made it for her. He said she looked like she needed a friend. Jonathan swallowed hard. His voice cracked. She does more than a broken bar anyone knows. Nathan didn't push. He didn't pry. But he did something no one else had done. He sat beside Jonathan without trying to fix him, without offering rich man solutions or medical articles or empty optimism. He just sat there, two fathers sharing the same invisible wound. Later that week, something impossible happened. Emma lifted the clay elephant. Jonathan saw it. He froze. He didn't move or breathe. He watched as Emma held the little sculpture for a long, fragile second before setting it back down. It was the first voluntary movement toward the outside world she had made in months. That tiny moment cracked something open. Jonathan didn't know what to make of it. Doctors didn't know either. But Nathan paused when he heard the news, nodded, and simply said, "Sometimes kids don't need perfection. They need presence. They need to know someone understands." Jonathan listened. For the first time in months, a broken bar, he really listened. Over the next few days, Nathan gently began showing Noah simple gestures and visual cues to communicate with Emma. Not sign language, she wasn't reading, but soft, slow movements, simple games that used expression rather than sound. Noah sat beside Emma every day, placing toys in front of her, drawing pictures, sometimes leaning his head on her wheelchair armrest as if to say, "I'll wait for you." And, as always, Nathan stayed close, giving space, giving quiet encouragement. Emma didn't respond at first, but one afternoon, as rain tapped gently on the window, Noah drew two stick figures holding hands. Emma stared at the drawing, her fingers twitched, and then, so slowly it looked like a dream, she reached for the crayon. Jonathan's hand flew to his mouth. His knees nearly buckled. Tears filled his eyes as Emma made a small scribble next to Noah's drawing, a sun. A tiny sun. Her first attempt at connection since the accident. Nathan stood behind Jonathan and placed a hand on his shoulder. "She's still in there," he whispered. "She just needs help finding her way out." Jonathan turned to him, voice shaking. "How do you know what to do?" Nathan's eyes softened. "Because I had to pull my own son out of his darkness, and because sometimes the people who look unfixably broken are just waiting for someone who won't give up on them." From that moment, Nathan and Noah became part of Emma's days. They taught her simple gestures, so tap twice for yes, once for number. They played quiet games focused on touch and sight rather than sound. They brought coloring books and soft toys. Noah would do silly faces, falling off chairs dramatically until Emma's lips twitched a broken bar, and one afternoon, she almost smiled. Jonathan watched them, stunned. His world dark, suffocating, silent, slowly began to glow again, and he began to see something else too. Nathan wasn't just helping Emma, he was helping him, teaching him how to be patient, teaching him how to communicate beyond words, teaching him how to breathe again. One day, Jonathan found Emma clutching Noah's hand tightly, refusing to let go even when it was time for him to leave. Another day, she leaned her head against Nathan's arm, trusting him in a way she no longer trusted anyone else. Slowly a broken bar, painfully slowly a broken bar. Her eyes began to show life again. She drew more. She tapped answers. She watched people. She began learning to sign simple words. She even let Jonathan hold her hand again. And that night, he cried harder than the night of her accident because she was coming back to him. But the turning point, the moment that felt like a miracle, came unexpectedly. It was early morning. The staff was switching shifts. Nathan found Emma sitting alone in the therapy room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her small face looked lost, broken, but this time, she didn't look away when he approached. She touched her chest with trembling fingers, then she pointed to her ears, then she shook her head. Nathan understood. "I'm not normal. I'm broken. Why try?" He knelt in front of her, eyes soft but steady. He placed her hands over his heart. Then he taped once, slow, deliberate, then again, and again, a rhythm, a heartbeat, connection. She watched him, tears filling her eyes. Then he gently guided her hand to Noah, who tapped back with a shy grin. Finally, Nathan placed her small hand against her father's chest. Jonathan's hand covered hers, shaking, and Nathan mouthed silently, slowly, clearly, so she could read his lips, "You're not alone." Emma broke. She collapsed into Jonathan's arms, sobbing silently at her first emotional release since the accident. Her tiny arms clung to him like she feared losing him all over again. From that day forward, Recovery accelerated. Emma learned sign language. She began smiling and really smiling. She started drawing suns and hearts and little elephants. She let Jonathan read her bedtime stories again, even if she couldn't hear them. She watched Jonathan and Nathan talk like old friends. She held Noah's hand everywhere they went. She was living again. And Jonathan, he found something he didn't even know he had lost: her faith. Not in medicine, not in money, but in people. In simple, quiet kindness, in everyday heroes. In one single dad who whispered, "I'll help her." Months later, at Emma's final therapy session, the staff gathered to celebrate her progress. She stood on her own, signed her first full sentence to her father, and when Jonathan hugged her, he whispered through tears, "You saved me too." Nathan watched from the doorway, smiling proudly, his hand resting on Noah's shoulder. Jonathan walked over, pulled him into a tight embrace, and whispered, "Thank you for giving me back my daughter." Nathan shook his head. "She chose to come back. We just showed her the way." If this story touched your heart, please like the video, drop a comment, subscribe, and share it so others can feel the same hope. Your engagement truly helps us continue making meaningful stories. Before the ending a broken bar, please comment, "Kindness can save anyone." Jonathan didn't offer Nathan money. He offered something far more valuably: friendship, family, and a future they could all share. The two families became intertwined in a way that felt destined. Emma regained her courage. Noah regained his confidence. Jonathan found a brother in Nathan, and Nathan found a place where he and Noah truly belonged. And the world, once silent and dark for Emma, became full of colors again. Because all it took to save her a broken bar was one whisper from someone who cared.